Saturday night, May 28, 1977, Memorial Day weekend. If you were in the Midwest and you wanted to feel like royalty, there was only one place to go. It wasn't in Chicago. It wasn't in New York. It was on a quiet hilltop in Southgate, Kentucky, just across the river from Cincinnati. The Beverly Hills Supper Club. They called it the Showplace of the nation, and that night it lived up to the name. The parking lot was an ocean of Cadillacs, Lincolns, and brand new Fords. Inside, 3,000 people were laughing, drinking, and celebrating life. Men in tuxedos, women in sequined gowns, the smell of expensive perfume mixing with the aroma of steak and cigar smoke. It was the definition of 1970s glamour. It was the perfect night out. But while the champagne was being poured and the band was warming up, a clock was already ticking down. Deep inside the walls of the building, hidden behind the gold paint and the velvet curtains, something had gone wrong. In less than 45 minutes, this palace of pleasure would become a chimney. The laughter would turn into silence, and the most exclusive club in America would become the site of the third deadliest nightclub fire in history. 165 people would never walk out of those doors. This is the story of the calm before the panic. This is the story of the night the music stopped. If real historical stories like this matter to you, consider subscribing. To understand why this night became a massacre, you first have to understand the trap. Because that's what the Beverly Hills Supper Club was, a beautiful, golden trap. The building wasn't designed, it evolved. It started small in the 1930s and grew like a living organism over 4 decades. Room was added upon room, corridor upon corridor. By 1977, it was a sprawling, confusing maze of 18 different dining rooms, bars, and performance halls, all connected by narrow hallways and hidden stairwells. It was a labyrinth, and it was a labyrinth built without a single sprinkler system. That night, the club was operating far beyond its capacity. Greed had packed the building to the breaking point. Tables were shoved into aisles, extra chairs blocked the pathways, every inch of space was monetized. The heart of the club was the Cabaret Room. This was the crown jewel, located at the very back of the complex, the furthest point from the main exits. That night, Hollywood star John Davidson was set to perform. The room was designed for 600 people, but by 9 p.m., nearly 1,300 people were squeezed inside. It was so crowded that the waiters could barely move. Shoulders were touching, knees were bumping against strangers. The air was hot, thick, and electric with anticipation. Meanwhile, on the complete opposite side of the sprawling building, near the front entrance, there was a small room called the Zebra Room. The Zebra Room had hosted a wedding reception earlier that afternoon, but now, at 9 p.m., it was dark, empty. The doors were closed. It sat there in the silence, unnoticed by the thousands of guests partying just down the hall. And it was there, in the quiet dark, that the spark happened. Investigators believe it started with the wiring, old aluminum wiring that couldn't handle the load of a modern nightclub. A spark inside the wall. It caught the wooden framing. It fed on the tri-insulation. It didn't explode immediately. It crept. It moved through the spaces between the walls like a ghost, feeding on oxygen from the ventilation ducts. While 1,300 people applauded in the Cabaret Room, the Zebra Room was slowly turning into a blast furnace. 8:55 p.m. 2 waitresses were walking past the closed doors of the Zebra Room. They stopped. They smelled something. It wasn't the heavy, choking smell of a bonfire. It was subtle, acrid, like burning plastic or overheated electronics. In a club that size, with industrial kitchens running at full power, weird smells weren't uncommon, but this felt different. They opened the door to the Zebra Room to check. They didn't see flames. They saw smoke, a thick gray layer of haze hovering near the ceiling, swirling lazily. The heat in the room was intense, but the source was invisible. The fire was still trapped inside the walls, cooking the room from the outside in. This is the moment where history holds its breath. This is the moment where a decision changes everything. The employees didn't pull the fire alarm immediately. Why? Because in the hospitality business, panic is bad for profits. You don't clear out a club full of paying millionaires for a false alarm. They grabbed fire extinguishers. They tried to fight the smoke themselves.
They closed the door to keep the guests in the hallway from seeing the problem. They lost 15 minutes. 15 minutes doesn't sound like much, but in a fire, 15 minutes is a lifetime. While the staff argued and sprayed extinguishers at the walls, the fire in the zebra room found what it was hungry for: oxygen. The heat shattered the glass windows, or perhaps the drop ceiling collapsed. Suddenly, fresh air rushed in. The physics of the room changed instantly. A phenomenon called flashover occurred. The entire room, the carpets, the curtains, the furniture, the air itself ignited simultaneously. The temperature spiked to 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit in seconds. The wooden doors of the zebra room disintegrated. The beast was out of the cage, and it began to move. The fire didn't just spread, it hunted. Toxic, superheated black smoke began to barrel down the main corridor. It moved fast, fed by the flammable carpet and the wallpaper glue.
It was heading straight for the Cabaret Room. In the Cabaret Room, deep in the back of the club, the atmosphere was joyous. Two comedy acts, Teeter and McDonald, were on stage warming up the crowd for John Davidson. Waiters were topping off wine glasses. The audience was laughing. They were completely insulated from the horror that was racing down the hallway toward them. Then, a young man walked onto the stage. His name was Walter Bailey. He was a busboy, 18 years old. He wasn't wearing a uniform of authority. He looked terrified. He had seen the smoke in the hallway, and he had made a choice that the managers hadn't made yet. Walter walked up to the comedians, whispered something, and took the microphone. Imagine the scene. The music cut out, the laughter died down. 1,300 faces, illuminated by candlelight, turned to look at this nervous kid. His voice was steady. He said, "Ladies and gentlemen, please, we have a small fire on the other side of the building.
There is no need to panic, but we need you to leave the room. Please, use the exits to your right and left. Leave your drinks, leave your coats. Please go now." This is the most frustrating part of the story. Psychologists call it normalcy bias. When people are in a safe, comfortable environment, their brains refuse to accept danger. Some people stood up immediately, but many didn't. They looked around. They saw other people sitting. They thought it was part of the act. Was this a comedy skit? Was the star about to come out? One survivor later said he heard a woman say, "I'm not leaving until I finish my filet mignon." They took their time. They grabbed their purses. They waited for their spouses to return from the restroom. They moved slowly, annoyed that their evening was being interrupted by a small fire. Walter Bailey saved hundreds of lives that night, but he couldn't save everyone, because time had run out.
Less than 2 minutes after Walter dropped the microphone, the main doors of the back of the Cabaret Room burst open. It wasn't people entering, it was the smoke. Witnesses described it as an oil slick rolling upside down along the ceiling. It wasn't gray, it was jet black. It moved faster than a man could run. It hit the back wall, curled down, and engulfed the room. Then the lights went out. The Beverly Hills Supper Club plunged into absolute pitch-black darkness. The screams began. The polite, slow-moving crowd instantly transformed into a desperate stampede. 1,300 people tried to move at once in the dark. Tables were overturned. Chairs became tripping hazards. People fell and were trampled. The layout of the room became a death sentence. The Cabaret Room had exits, but they weren't enough. The main exit, where most people instinctively ran, led directly into the main hallway, directly into the fire. The people who ran that way were met with a wall of flame.
They turned back, colliding with the crush of people behind them. It became a deadlock. There was a service exit behind the stage, a small door. Hundreds surged toward it. The pressure of the crowd was so immense that people were squeezed through the doorway like toothpaste. But then a pileup occurred. Someone fell, then another. Within seconds, the doorway was blocked by a wall of bodies, stacked 5 feet high. People behind him were pushing, crushing the life out of those in front, unaware that the way was blocked. But the fire wasn't the main killer. It was the smoke. This wasn't wood smoke. This was the 1970s. The club was decorated with synthetic materials, plastics, foams, acrylics. When they burned, they released a cocktail of cyanide and carbon monoxide. It didn't make you cough, it turned off your brain. Survivors described seeing people simply sit back down in their chairs. They didn't scream. They just got confused, sat down in the dark, and went to sleep.
Firefighters later found people sitting at tables, looking like they were waiting for the show to start, dead from the toxic gas before the flames ever touched them. Outside, on the hillside, it was a scene from hell. The white, stately building was glowing orange. Flames were shooting hundreds of feet into the air. People who had escaped were stumbling around the parking lot, their faces blackened with soot, their expensive evening gowns shredded. They were screaming names, looking for husbands, looking for wives. The roof of the Cabaret Room began to sag, and then, with a groan that sounded like the earth splitting, it collapsed. Sunday morning broke over Southgate, Kentucky. The fire was out, but the smoke still drifted lazily from the blackened skeleton of the club. The lawn, which had been manicured and green just hours before, was now a makeshift morgue. Bodies were laid out in rows. They were covered with tablecloths from the dining room, bed sheets from neighbors, anything to offer a shred of dignity. Doctors who had been guests at the club, still wearing their ruined tuxedos, moved from body to body, checking for a pulse. Priests moved down the lines, giving last rites. 165 people died. When the investigators finally entered the ruins, what they found haunted them for the rest of their lives. They found bodies stacked near the exits, reaching out for doors they couldn't open. They found the zebra room, the source of it all, burned down to the foundation. They found the truth. The investigation revealed a catalog of negligence.
The club had been expanded without permits. The wiring was a ticking time bomb. There were no sprinkler systems. The occupancy limits were ignored to maximize profit. The Beverly Hills Supper Club wasn't just a tragedy, it was a crime. But amidst the horror, there were stories of incredible bravery. Walter Bailey, the busboy. The valet parkers who ran into the burning building to pull people out. The firefighters who worked until they collapsed from exhaustion. The fire changed America. If you walk into a nightclub today, or a theater, or a restaurant, look up, you will see a sprinkler head. Look down, you will see lights along the floor leading to an exit. Those safety measures were written in the ashes of the Beverly Hills Supper Club. The hill in Southgate is quiet now. The ruins were cleared away years ago. But locals say that on warm nights in May, when the wind blows through the trees, the air feels heavy. They say that if you listen closely, you don't hear the fire. You hear the faint sound of music, laughter, and the clinking of champagne glasses, the sounds of a party that never got to finish. The night the music stopped. I'm Eddie, and this has been The Calm Before History. If you want to support our channel and help us keep these stories alive, please like and subscribe. And tell me in the comments, what is a local tragedy in your town that history seems to have forgotten? Good night, and stay safe.